The roaring economy is roaring like never before. Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it.
CNN's fact-check team determined President Trump made at least 20 false or misleading claims. CNN's Daniel Dale is here, as he always is at this time in our lives. Let's start with the economy. I will play here some of the claims that the president made. Take a listen.
12 months ago, I had just inherited a nation in crisis with a stagnant economy, inflation at record levels. In 12 months, I secured commitments for more than $18 trillion pouring in from all over the globe. I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax.
And the facts say, Daniel?
A whole lot of nonsense there. I'm going to start from the end. So the president claimed that tariffs are paid for by foreign countries. They simply are not. The tariff payments to the U.S. government are made by U.S. importers, and we know from life experience and from academic study after study that they often pass on some or all of their costs to the final consumer. He claimed again that he secured $18 trillion in investments so far this term. That number is total fiction. The White House's own website uses, at this very moment, a figure of 9.7 million in so-called major investment promises or announcements. And I found that even that 9.7 trillion figure is a wild exaggeration. And then this whole economic narrative that he inherited record inflation. He didn't. He inherited 3.0% inflation, just a bit above where it is now, 2.4%. And this claim he inherited a stagnant economy is now roaring like never before. Look, economic growth in 2025, mostly under Trump, was 2.2%. That was partly affected by the government shutdown in the fall, but it was 2.8% under President Biden in 2025. It was also higher than 2.2% in every other year of the Biden administration before 2024. And other metrics also don't suggest any corroboration of this narrative that there was some terrible, diseased, stagnant economy that is now booming. It's just not the case.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that he quoted this $18 trillion, but on their own website, it's $9.7 trillion that they are touting. So there's a huge discrepancy there. All right. The president also said he's responsible for low gas prices, getting them to below $2 in some states. What do the facts say in this one?
Yeah, so he said most states have gas prices below $2.30. Not a single state yesterday had a gas price average, according to AAA, below $2.37. And then how many stations were below $2? Well, I spoke to Gas Buddy, a firm that tracks more than 150,000 gas stations around the U.S. They told me that 4 stations yesterday were selling for below $2 aside from special discounts. 4 out of 150,000. So yes, they exist, but the president didn't make clear that we're talking like beyond needle in a haystack territory here.
With us now is CNN senior reporter David Goldman. Hi, good morning to you, David. So let's talk about the economy, what the president said there. You say the president isn't wrong when he says America's economy is strong, but Americans don't necessarily feel that. Why?
Yeah, well, it's because the economy is not about numbers. It's about affordability to so many people. That's the thing that drives voters to the polls, right? So if you have a really strong economy, and we do, I mean, growth is pretty robust, jobs are rebounding a little bit, inflation's under control. So all of those things are true, but it's very, very hard for people to afford this economy. There are many prices that you can't avoid paying for that are outpacing overall inflation. So if you take a look, overall inflation is 2.4% right now. That's pretty good. But if you look at things like housing, if you look at electricity, natural gas, those are all outpacing overall inflation. And the problem is that you can't avoid paying for any of them. That's causing this economy to feel pretty unaffordable to so many people.
Yeah, those basic necessities. And right now, David, wealthier Americans, it seems as though they are benefiting and lower income households are struggling. Help us better understand that dynamic.
Yeah, we call it the K-shaped economy because if you're at the top of the K, you're pretty wealthy, you probably have a home, and you probably refinanced that home, say around the pandemic when rates were between 2 and 3%. You're doing pretty good right now. But if you don't have really high income, you might not have a home that you own, and you're really struggling right now to find anywhere that you can live affordably. And so what that's caused is this kind of K-shaped divergence, which is not a new trend, let's be clear, but it is getting worse. And it's getting worse largely because of the housing market, but also because of the elimination of some social services, other things like that that are making it a little bit harder for people to survive. And if you look overall, inflation is at 2.4% right now, but wage growth is at 3.7%. So you would think, well, our paychecks are going further. But Bank of America has some really, really interesting data that came out just a couple weeks ago that shows that if you're middle America, if you're sort of middle income rather, you're only getting a paycheck growth annually of 1.6%. And if you're lower income, that's only 0.9%. So what that means is that your paycheck isn't keeping up with inflation, and that is causing a lot of the affordability concerns that we're seeing as well.
Just one quick follow-up. The president unveiled the proposals last night that he said would help with affordability. He talked about a retirement plan for Americans without access to 401k. He talked about policies already enacted, including tax cuts, Trump accounts for babies, and efforts to lower prescription drug prices. And he pointed out one of the guests in the audience there who was getting IVF fertility treatments at a much lower rate now. Are those policies paying off?
Well, some of them are. So the mortgage bond buyback, it was about $200 billion. That almost immediately had an effect on mortgage rates. It knocked them down a little bit. And that's really good news for people that are trying to afford a home. Prescription drug prices, like you mentioned, that's having an effect too. But there are some others like, the Trump accounts that haven't really gone into effect yet. They're not having a big impact right now. We'll have to see. Tax cuts are another thing. A lot of people are waiting for their tax rebate. That could have an effect. But the big thing, the key economic policy that Trump keeps doubling down on is tariffs. And that is raising prices. That's making America less affordable than it was before. The conservative-leaning tax foundation says that an average American household paid $1,000 more last year in tax payments. So that's not exactly a great policy, and that's one that Trump is doubling down on. It's not great for affordability.
All right, David Goldman, thank you. Great to have you on the show.
I want to get some more now on the president's State of the Union address and the Democratic response. I want to bring in CNN's chief political analyst, David Axelrod. He previously served as a senior advisor to President Obama. David, thanks so much for coming in. Based on everything you heard last night, what stood out to you the most from that speech?
Well, I agree with you. David Chalian's always good, and he was good here. I think that Republicans were relieved because he didn't get in his own way. He stuck to the script. If you were his strategist, you were relieved because he largely stuck to the script. But the problem is that far and away the biggest concern people have is the economy. And he told a story of the economy that did not match people's experience. And you cannot jawbone people into feeling what they're not experiencing. So that's a problem for him. The most interesting thing to me from a strategic standpoint was I think you do see the blueprint of how they hope to attack these midterm elections. Hard for any incumbent to gain seats in a midterm election, but they want to talk about tax cuts as their answer to the economy. They want to talk about fraud in the states of federal money, as they found in Minnesota, as a way of saying this is where your money's going. Forget about the tax cuts for the rich. This is where your money is going. They want to talk about immigrants, and they want to regain the edge on the immigration issue, which was squandered because of ICE's overreaction. And then finally, they want to define the Democrats and create a kind of straw man to run against. So that line, these people are crazy, it seemed like an ad lib. It was written into his text. That is the picture they want to paint. That your guest, Ilhan Omar, they want her to be the face of the Democratic Party. They want Mamdani to be the face of the Democratic Party that they can sort of organize against. Whether this will work, I think, is a very big question. But at least you saw what they're thinking about strategically moving forward to November.